I would like to explain the concept of conservative financing policy using the numbers, hoping that you will understand more. Now, take a look at all 7 points in the diagram. All 7 points in the diagram. And you need to understand a few things before we explain using the numbers in the table. Okay. First of all, the height of the wave here. This is your modified total assets. Modified total assets. Okay. And of course, the statement of financial position must be balanced. Therefore, let me check first. And according, I should have drawn the dotted line. Please take a look at point number 1. Now, if you just use only long-term capital, take a look at the height of the dotted line. The statement of financial position is not balanced, right? It's not balanced. Let's say the height of the wave here is equal to 700 baht. So at this point, this is equal to 700 baht. The long-term capital, this point is equal to 650. This is 650. Therefore, you don't have enough money to invest in operating assets. You don't have enough money to invest in operating assets. You need to find another type of capital in order to finance the temporary net operating working capital. This part, right? So you can see that you need 50 baht at point number 1. And how can you find this 50 baht? So just take a look at this difference. This is short-term capital, long-term funds. So at this point, now, if you take a look at the table again, and then I am going to come back to the graph. Take a look at point number 1. Your total asset is equal to 700. Your total liabilities and own equity must be 702. Therefore, the difference between 650 must be, just a moment. Of course, you must add a number that makes the statement of financial position to be balanced. The sum between 200 and 450 is not equal to 700. There is a difference of 50. So this 50 must come from short-term funds. Okay. Now, please take a look at um, the top point of the wave here. The total amount must be equal to 700. Must be equal to 700. So total assets are 700. Total liabilities are 700 too. And then you see that the sum of long-term funds, is equal to 650. And this is not enough to finance all assets during the peak season. It is not enough. You may need to invest more in inventory, for example, equal to the difference between 700 and 650. This inventory is part of variable inventory that you must invest during your seasonal high. So turn to the asset side. You have, assuming that 400 baht of net non-current asset. At this peak point, there will be no excess cash at all. Therefore, your marketable securities will be equal to 0. It is not possible for a firm following the conservative policy to hold marketable securities if it is at the peak point of the season. Because excess cash must be used to invest in, for example, operating cash, or buying inventories, or invest in accounts receivable. Okay, so the rest must be your variable or temporary net operating working capital, and together that must be 200 baht. That is, you can see from the diagram that from the x-axis here up to this point, this is your net non-current asset, right? And the number is 700 baht. We assume that from this point, please look at the cursor. From this point to this point, this is your permanent net operating working capital. According to the number in the table, this is equal to 100 baht. And then from this point up to the top here, this is your variable net operating working capital. So the amount here is equal to 200. Okay. Of course, the graph is not drawn to scale. From this point to this point, you may assume that it is 150, and the rest, this is equal to 50. Now, you can see that this firm follows a conservative policy. Assets, non-current assets, are financed by long-term capital. The whole part of permanent non-operating assets is financed by long-term capital as well. And only part of variable net operating working capital is financed by long-term capital. But that's not enough. You still need some money. This is 50 baht to invest in variable net operating working capital. And that part must come from short-term fund, for example, and OD from a bank. Okay, so that is at the first peak point, the first cycle. Now, when time goes by, the total amount of assets declines. Okay? It declines because inventories that have been sold becomes cash now. accounts receivable can be collected now. So the firm can get some cash. The firm can get some cash. After getting some cash, the firm is going to repay the short-term loan from a bank. Therefore, you can see that this curve represents both total assets and total liabilities and equity. Total liabilities and equity. As time goes by, total assets decline. Total liabilities and equity also decline because cash that is received will be used to repay short-term loans. Therefore, short-term loans decline as times go by, assuming that other numbers are according to the numbers in the table. Now, when we move from this peak point to the second point here, you can see that the statement of financial position is still balanced. However, short-term loan that was borrowed at point number 1 has been repaid. So at point number 2, part of the net operating working capital that is variable will be gone, leaving only this part. All right. And at the second point, there will be no more short-term funds. Because all of them are being repaired from point 1 to point 2. Right? However, you don't have excess cash. At point 2, you don't have excess cash. Therefore, there's no short-term investment either. So at point number 2, just complete the table here. You have repaid short-term loan. So this one is equal to 0. And of course, you should know that at point 2, there's no excess cash. So marketable securities are equal to 0. The rest goes to variable net operating working capital, 150. So please compare the numbers at 2 points. When you are at the peak season, okay, you have to invest 50 baht more in variable net operating working capital. And that 50 baht are financed by short-term funds. When you are at point 2, you are able to repay the principal of the short-term funds because now you can collect some cash, right? And no need to invest in more variable net operating working capital because now you are moving out of the peak season. This is a point number 2. At point number 3, I am assuming that total variable net operating working capital is equal to 60. Of course, you are able to complete the table right away. Just make the total assets equal to 670, right? So the number here can be calculated very easily. But conceptually, I would like you to understand why we have a positive number at point 3 for marketable securities. Okay? I'm going to go slowly by moving you along the time. And along the curve here. Right? Now, please take a look at point number 2 first. After point 2, the firm is moving out of the peak season towards the off-peak season. Okay? So it is going to collect money from accounts receivable. It is going to get some cash from selling inventories, either on cash or credit. Therefore, your total assets during point 2 and point 3 will be according to the curve, right? So now you have some excess cash equal to the height of the curve and the dotted line. The further to the right, the larger amount of excess cash the firm holds. However, like we said earlier, the principle number 4, when the firm has excess cash, it converts excess cash into marketable securities. Okay, so at point 3, there must be a positive marketable securities. Now, the sum of the operating asset and the marketable securities will be exactly equal to total liabilities and owner's equity. Yeah, let me show you the line first. From this point to this point, the height of the curve is your total operating asset. But your total liabilities and owner equity is equal to the height of the dotted line. So you can see that there is some excess cash, and you cannot spend excess cash to repay the principal because this is a long-term contract, right? So you are going to convert excess cash to marketable securities, and now your statement of financial position is still balanced. So take a look at the numbers on the right hand side. Here, you don't have any short-term loans from financial institution. I am assuming that long-term loan is constant over time, but the owner's equity changes according to time. Right? So at point number 3, there are 2 things that you should understand. There's no short-term loans left anymore because they have been repaid all at point 2. And second, at point 3, there is some excess cash. So the firm transfers excess cash into marketable securities. So at point 3, marketable securities must be positive. So if we assume that variable NOWC is equal to 60, this one must be 90, so that you have 670 for the total assets. Right? Now, take a look at point 3 to point 4. Here, from here to this point, it is at the bottom of the season. Therefore, please look at the cursor first. This height is your total operating assets. But this height is your total liabilities and owner's equity. Okay, looks like the statement is not balanced. It is not such because you have some excess cash equal to the height, the difference between these 2 points. Okay, this is your total operating asset. This is your excess cash. Therefore, the sum will be exactly equal to the liabilities and owner's equity. And at point 4, you are going to have the maximum amount of marketable securities because this is your off-peak season, and therefore excess cash will be the largest, and therefore the marketable securities will be the largest too. And according to our numbers at time point 4, now one thing that you should know at time 4, is there any variable net operating working capital? No, not at all. Look at this point. Okay, this is permanent net operating working capital. This is your non-current asset. Therefore, at this point, there's no variable net operating working capital because it is at the bottom of the season. So this one must be 0. And therefore, the difference here must be marketable securities, which is equal to 150. Is there any short-term loans? No. We have enough sources of capital to finance our operating assets during the off-peak season. And then we are approaching the second cycle. By moving from point 4 to point 5, please take a look at the graph first. From point 4 to point 5, the firm may have to buy more inventory in preparation for the second peak season. Where is the money? No need to tap it from the outside sources because you have some marketable securities. Sell them first. This is like an internal capital. So the firm is going to sell some marketable securities. Therefore, your total amount of marketable securities will be smaller than 150. Okay. So at this point, if I assume that additional temporary net working capital is equal to 70, therefore the total amount of marketable securities is equal to 80. And then all three numbers sum up to 680. Do we need to borrow short term right now? At 0.5? Not yet. We still have some marketable securities left. Don't worry about borrowing short term. Okay. Point 6. You are going to deplete marketable securities here. Look at point 6 here. You still need some cash for investments in variable net operating working capital. But you don't need to go and borrow short-term from a bank. You can sell off your marketable securities. So at point 6, your marketable securities should be 0. Your short-term loan should be 0 too. Okay? So at point 6, this is 150. The point is that, how do you know? Because at point 6, no marketable securities are left because you sell them off to get cash to invest in more variable net working capital. And of course, you can use internal capital by selling marketable securities. Therefore, no need to borrow short term. Not yet. But the firm is about to borrow short term because now total assets keep increasing. So from 0.6 here to the second big point here. You need to buy more temporary net operating working capital. Internal capital is gone. Therefore, this part, you see that this part must be financed by short-term funds. Short-term funds. So this one must be short-term funds. And you can see that at point 7, no marketable securities. No marketable security. The rest must be all temporary net operating working capital. And in order to make your total liabilities and equity to be 750, short-term funds must be 40. Must be 40. So now you can see that this numerical example illustrates the principle number 4 of the conservative financing policy, and then it explains how financing is used in order to finance the firm's operating assets. You can follow the numbers here for the aggressive policy as well. But for the aggressive one, it is easier than this. This one is more difficult in the sense that whenever there is excess cash, the firm must transfer excess cash into marketable securities to earn some incomes. Okay? So to repeat, a firm that follows a conservative financing policy will do the following. 1. Use short-term funds to finance partly its variable net operating working capital. And number 2, the rest must be financed by long-term funds, including part of the variable net working capital, okay, the whole part of permanent net operating working capital, and all non-current assets. And third, like we said before the break, the lines that tells whether you are more conservative or less conservative can move up and down, depending on whether if you use more long-term capital to finance assets, you are more conservative. And number four, when there is excess cash, the firm transfer it into marketable securities and then sell them when the firm needs some cash in the future. Right? Now, before we move to see the effect of risk and return, I would like you to understand again that when we talk about financing, there are two types of capital, short-term and long-term. We are deciding whether to use short-term funds to finance short-term assets and long-term funds to finance long-term assets. Okay. Variable net operating working capital is classified as short-term operating assets. Variable, right? Net working capital is a short-term asset, correct? And variable net operating working capital is short-term, both by name and by its behavior, right? But for permanent net operating working capital, by name, it is short-term. By nature, it is not. It is long-term. That's why we classify this part as permanent operating asset, okay? So basically, this is long-term, this is long-term. and this is short term. So you just split the funds into two types, short-term funds and long-term funds. If you use more short-term funds, you are more aggressive. If you use more long-term funds, you are conservative. Okay? Questions? All right. Now, take a look at the margin of safety for the conservative policy. According to this policy, you are going to see that the total amount of long-term funds is larger than the total amount of permanent operating assets. And therefore, if the firm follows this conservative financing policy, margin of safety will be positive. Long-term capital larger than permanent operating assets. Now, the effect on risk and return. This is just the opposite of the first policy. A manager or a firm that follows this policy experiences low risk, because the liquidity will be very high. So bankruptcy will be small. I mean, the probability of bankruptcy will be small. Your friend mentioned about refinancing risk. This is also a good point. If you use more long-term capital, right? For example, common stock or retained earnings, there is no maturity at all. So you don't need to refinance. At all. So the risk of refinancing will be small. This is totally different when you use a large amount of short-term capital, like a 3-month short-term loan. So when after 3 months you need to refinance, and the interest rate at that time may be higher. Therefore, the risk of refinancing is also high. It is not just the increasing cost of capital, it is a risk of not being able to refinance too. Okay? But when it comes to the conservative policy, the risk of refinance is low, the risk of default is low. Okay? And therefore, the firm will not ask for a higher rate of return. Because if it is low risk, then it must be related to low expected return. And this is quite clear. When the firm uses a large proportion of long-term capital, the cost of capital will be huge. Other than constant, the net income will be small. Okay? The cost of capital is large, so the net income will be small, resulting in low expected return. Third, this is the third financing policy. You may call this policy hedging, maturity matching, or self-liquidating financing policy. I'm going to explain why this policy is called as such. Now, I'm going to start with a maturity matching. A general principle is easy. Finance short-term assets by using short-term funds. Finance long-term assets by long-term capital. This is very broad and general. So you match the maturities of the funds and the assets. Let me repeat. This policy is called a maturity matching policy because the firm finances short-term assets by using short-term funds and finances long-term assets by using long-term funds. To be more specific, the firm is going to finance inventories that can be converted into cash in 3 months by short-term funds that mature in 3 months as well. For example, you buy inventory on cash, so cash is gone. Inventory will liquidate itself into cash if you make sales on cash, but it takes 2 steps. In order to get cash from inventory, if you make sales on credit, so you can see that inventories liquidate itself into cash, and after cash is collected, the new cycle begins. So if the whole process takes 3 months, right, then financing the inventories should be done with a 3-month financing as well. For example, these inventories may be financed by a 3-month short-term loan from a bank or by buying from suppliers on credit, expecting to pay the suppliers within 3 months, right? If you buy inventory on, I don't know how to draw the diagram so that it is nice. I want to add one more accounts payable here. Okay, this should be fine. Buy on credit, right? And after cash is collected, then pays the bill. So now you can see that how inventories liquidate themselves into cash, and then the cash is used to buy more inventories or is used to pay the bill. And you can see that if the cycle of inventory is approximately 3 months, you will use short-term funds that has maturity of 3 months to finance inventories as well. It is not necessary to be credit suppliers here. It can be a short-term loan from a bank. So if the firm doesn't have enough cash, it may borrow from a bank and then expecting to repay the principal back to the bank within 3 months. After inventories are sold within 3 months, the cash is used to repay the loan. That's why it is called the self-liquidating. And by matching the maturities like this, the firm hedges maturity risk. Maturity risk. That's why this policy is called hedging policy. So let me repeat the concept again. This is a broad concept. Finance long-term funds using finance long-term assets using long-term funds. Finance short-term assets with short-term funds. To be more, sorry? Broad concept. To be more specific, you need to define how short is short, how long is long. For example, if inventories have 3-month maturity, then finance inventories by sources of funds with 3-month maturities. Or a machine, right? A machine has 10-year maturity. Then finance this machine by a 10-year source of fund. Okay. Right? Now, concept. Take a look at the graph again. Please be careful. You have the dotted line already. And now, the dotted line must be exactly on the connecting line. Remember, we have a connecting line, a line that connects the yellow and the blue areas, right? And this dotted line in the third policy is exactly on the top of that connecting line. Separating assets in two groups, short-term and long-term. And with this line, you can see that principle number 1, the firm uses short-term funds to finance the whole part of variable net operating working capital. So now I am repeating the principle that have just been mentioned a few seconds. That is, the firm uses short-term funds to finance its short-term assets. And of course, this part is short-term. Okay, that's rule number 1. Number 2, the firm uses long-term funds to finance the following assets. Everything is written on top of the diagram. 2.1, permanent net operating working capital. 2.2, non-current assets. So both 2.1 and 2.2, they are permanent operating assets. And therefore, according to the matching maturity policy, the firm is going to use long-term funds because the maturities of these two types of assets are long-term. Okay? All right? Margin of safety. Would you like to guess? 0. Because now you have exactly the same numbers. Total amount of long-term funds and total amount of permanent operating assets are exactly the same. Therefore, the margin of safety in this case is equal to 0. Put it in other words, there is no margin of safety. Let me recall your memory a little bit. For the aggressive, this one is negative because you use short-term funds to finance part of long-term assets too. Okay? For the conservative, this is positive because you use long-term funds to finance some short-term assets too. But for this one, this is equal to 0. For the effects on risk and return, this is a general conclusion. This is a general conclusion. The risk and return should be somewhere between those of the two extremes. Should be somewhere between those of two extremes, okay? And I said this is the general idea. But I would like you to add one more thing about the risk in the third case. You can see that the maturity risk has been hedged. The maturity risk has been hedged. In this case, it is a risk from the maturity gap. Let me explain to you more. Because for assets, right, you have two types, short-term and long-term. And for funds, you also have short-term and long-term. Okay? So it is possible that the maturities of assets and funds are different. So when maturities of assets and funds are different, we call that we have a maturity gap. Maturity gap. A maturity gap. This occurs when the maturities of assets and funds are not the same. Now, when you use the maturity matching, we use short-term funds to finance short-term assets. We use long-term funds to finance long-term assets. So there will be no more maturity gap. There's no more maturity gap. This is in general, because you need to define how short is short, how long is long. Right? This is a general idea first. So the risk of mismatching maturities, is gone. Again, which one is the best among the three? Right? Before that, let's discuss a few ideas first, some considerations. Cash reserve, you can read your textbook. Look at this one. Second one. Which financing policy that you should follow may depend on so many factors. One of them is whether a maturity matching is important to your company or not. Is maturity matching important to your company or your industry or not? Imagine a financial industry like a bank. This maturity matching is very, very important to a bank. And therefore, most of the time, banks will follow a maturity matching financing policy in order to make sure that the maturity gap is the narrowest. To be more perfect, the bank may try to eliminate the maturity gap because that is quite risky for many banks if there are some mismatching between source of capital and assets. Let me show you two examples. Just simple examples, okay? Assuming that this bank lends 3 months, the bank lends short-term loans, assuming that the maturity is equal to 3 months. However, it finances this investment by many deposits. And I am assuming that the deposits are long-term. For example, 2 years deposit. 2 years deposit. You can see that there is a mismatch between the loans and the deposits. If the interest rate is fixed, let's say on this side, this is equal to 4%. It is fixed for 2 years, 4%. However, when the bank lends loan for 3 months, the interest rate here may be equal to, let's say, 6%. 6%. However, after 3 months, the loans must be repaid, and a new loan will be offered to the new customer. At the time of the first lending, the interest rate that the bank charges the customers is equal to 6%. However, at this time, when the bank offers the loan to the new customer, it is risky because the bank is not sure whether the interest rate during the next 3 months will be 6%, greater than 6%, or lower than 6%. The bank does not like the third situation, where the market interest rate drops, so the new loan may be offered at the rate lower than the one before. And it is a disaster if this one is lower than 4%, or at least 4%, right? Because the bank doesn't have any chance to get any profit at all, because the cost of capital has been fixed at 4% for 2 years. So there's a risk of the reinvestment here. If the interest rate goes up, that is fine. But if the interest rate goes down, that is a bad situation. This happens because of the maturity of the funds is longer than the maturity of the assets. The second example can illustrate a problem here as well. I am going to use a situation where the loan is long and let's say 20 years. So basically long term, right? But the deposit, let's say 3 months. So now this is a problem because the bank needs to refinance the funds by renewing the deposits, right? So what happens here is that if the interest rate in the next cycle increases, therefore the interest rate that the bank charge is fixed already at K%. So if the K here increases, then it is possible that the bank is not profitable at all. Let's say this is fixed at 8% and this is 4%, and in the next period this goes up to, let's say, 7%. Now the bank can get a smaller margin, and sometimes it is even not profitable anymore because this is fixed, right? It is the long term. Okay. In many countries, the long-term loans rate are fixed. We call that fixed interest rate. But in Thailand, the bank does not do that. It lends on a floating rate. Okay. So basically, the bank doesn't want to bear the risk of the changing interest rate. Okay. But I'm using I'm using this example to show you that whenever there is a mismatch of the maturities of assets and funds, that's a problem. You need to learn the asset liability management, and this is offered in FN311, Financial Institutions Management. So 45 hours there can help you understand more about an important technique called asset liability management, trying to close or eliminate the gap, okay, occurring because of the mismatching of maturities. This is important, right? For us, this is important enough. So for many corporations, if maturity matching is very important, it is more likely that managers are going to choose the third financing policy instead of aggressive or conservative. Okay. And one more consideration: relative interest rates. Relative interest rate. Like I told you earlier, when we got a question, the yield curve is usually has a upward slope like this. This is a general situation. However, if this one occurs, it happens, but even if the chance is very low, it may show some downward sloping yield curve like this. So if this is the case, even if an aggressive managers may choose to use long-term funds, right? Because the cost of using long-term funds is lower, because this is not a typical situation. Usually, aggressive managers prefer which type of capital? Short-term or long-term? Short-term. And then the cost of short-term funds is smaller. However, in a situation like a black curve like this, even if aggressive managers may prefer long-term capital, because the relative cost of borrowing is smaller. It doesn't mean that they change their attitude. They are still aggressive managers, but because long-term capital has smaller interest rate, therefore aggressive manager may switch from using a lot of short-term capital to use long-term capital, right? For the conservative managers, right? They want to sleep well at night. They don't want to think about what I'm going to do tomorrow, because now one loan comes due and they don't know where to find money to repay the loan, right? So they prefer to pay large amount of interest expenses or cost of capital. That's better for them because they can become relaxed, right? That's the nature of conservative managers. That's totally different from the aggressive manager. Right. Uh, of course, there is a maturity gap, because think about a totally conservative manager, right, who finances all assets using long-term funds. There are some part of assets with short maturities, variable net working capital, right? So funds are long-term. Therefore, there is still a maturity matching here, a maturity mismatching. Yes, sir. What type of manager would you want me to explain? Conservative, right? Okay, completely conservative here. So all long-term funds, right? But this part of asset is short-term. So there is a mystery mismatching. This is long-term asset. That's it. Yeah, during some periods, maturity. Inventories should have short or long maturities. Right, but you need to think about the original maturity, the renewal of the asset or the loans. That is a renewal of a maturity, right? So if your inventories can be sold at 3 months, then you have the second cycle, the next 3 months, right? The next 3 months. So it is short term. The negative point of maturity, this is explained here. Yeah, for some industries and for some corporations, mismatching is very risky. It's very risky. Any other questions? All right. So again, we need to use the risk-return trade-off. We need to use the risk-return trade-off, and the last page shows the combination of both conservative, moderate, and aggressive. You can take a look at some ratios. You can take a look at some ratios, and you can see that the first company is more relaxed or more conservative. Take a look at current ratio. This one is the highest. That means liquidity will be the highest. Or you can take a look at the net operating working capital. The amount of the net working capital is the highest. You can find the proportion between net working capital and sales. You are going to get the same thing. And for the return, you can calculate, for example, ROE or ROA. So for a more conservative one, you should expect to have the lowest return on asset here. Okay, because you hold a large amount of asset, especially net operating working capital, that yields low return. Therefore, you should expect the lowest return on assets. Compared to a more restricted policy here on the right-hand side, liquidity will be lowest. Current ratio is just 0.83 times. Net working capital is negative. And then the expected ROE is equal to 20.44%, the highest. Any questions? Yes. Yeah, you can use current ratio, quick ratio, or some other ratios that can help you determine the liquidity, right? Or some other risk as well. Debt ratio may be helpful too. Okay, but this is one of the best to check liquidity. Yes. By definition, net working capital is equal to current asset minus current liabilities, right? Yeah. Or you can calculate the proportion between net working capital and sales. You're going to get the same thing. Okay. The proportion will be the lowest. Any questions? Okay, according to the schedule, we have the last quiz today. And please turn to page 8. Anyone needs paper? You can use your own. I don't have enough paper, I think. But, I'm going to stop the recording.